Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hello, sir. I barely got to talk to you today, which is good because I've said this before,
It's
but
very
like
emergent,
it's
yeah.
very emergent, but it's like the old Regis and Kathy Lee.
Oh, yes.
I mean, I'm really throwing it back at
I
that
mean,
point.
really far
How
because,
many remember Regis and Kathy Lee? I think
yeah.
that there are quite a few of our viewers that may remember Regis and Kathy Lee.
And then what happened? Regis and
And then
Kelly?
it was Regis and Kelly.
Okay, okay.
And then Regis stepped away. And of course, rest in peace, Regis Feldman. He died during the pandemic, although I don't think it was of the pandemic.
No,
But
he just was,
yeah.
it was
Anyway,
finally his time.
then Kelly was with um Michael Strahan.
Oh, yeah.
And he ditched her. That was a whole big thing. And then
Right.
she got Ryan Seacrest,
Uh,
which I don't know. I don't know how I feel about Ryan Seacrest. I don't know. He kind of rubs
yeah,
me the
there's
wrong
a
way
couple of
sometimes.
things going on there too,
Anyway, and then after
but all
that,
successful
so
people.
now, she's with her husband.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They finally, like, he would always fill in.
And is the show still popular? Like
I
people
don't know how, I mean, I don't
to it?
know. It's hard to say. It's hard to say.
It goes on and
Anyway, the whole point of that was,
a la Saturday Night Live. There's been good seasons, there's been bad
yeah, yeah,
seasons, there's
yeah.
been good
I
cast
mean,
members, there's been bad cast
I
members.
think the novelty of it's like her husband is like, because it really does sort of go against the thing that started this whole conversation, which has nothing to do with foresight, but that Regis would purposely like not want to talk to his co-host at the time, Kathy Lee, and then
Oh, because he didn't want to set it up and
he wanted it to be super, super
right.
like organic
Because
and
you could
like,
tell when guests come on Jimmy Fallon's Tonight Show,
yeah,
whatever, they've planned out
they vetted a lot of
the
stuff. Yeah,
whole interview
whenever they
whole
had
thing.
stars,
Yeah.
they are always there to like promote certain things,
Yeah.
and they always like, oh, what's a funny thing that
Yes.
we could say?
Yeah.
But
Oh, I'm going to talk about this thing from your life, and you can
but
talk about
whenever
this.
they would do the opening part where it was just the two co-hosts, he would purposely want to make it so that they hadn't seen each other since the day before. Now, since then, there's been a little bit of gossip around like he just was a jerk also and like didn't want to hang out with anybody and nobody wanted to hang out with him. So it might have been more to do with that. But either way, I feel like we're in that situation today because
Yes.
you hadn't been here all that long.
Yes.
And yesterday we didn't physically see each other.
Yes, it just didn't feel well yesterday.
Yeah.
So it wasn't
And I
make it to
had
the office.
yeah, and I had a
There was
doctor's
a lot.
appointment.
There
It
was
was
a
a
lot
lot.
going on.
It was a
There's
lot.
always a lot going on.
Information they do not need, but
By the way, another brief segue, and then we'll get right into the foresight stuff. But this reminds me, I read an article yesterday that a professor, a very smart person from, I think, Georgetown, she has proposed um, that the Democrats can choose a different, person to run for president via her plan is that you find the 6 or 7 people. None of them can say anything negative. They've only got a few weeks. They all have to just talk about their policy and positive things. They're not running against each other, just running.
Okay.
And they're interviewed on live television over a 2-week period by Oprah and Taylor Swift.
So, number one,
you must have read this.
No, I haven't. Number one,
look surprised.
Number one, I've explicitly told you that I am not partaking in any political discourse. For those of you that are joining us from outside the US or are like me, that are choosing to shelter their hearts and souls and minds from this election year. I know it's not very foresighty or futurist of me, but I'm trying to just keep my sanity. For those of you that aren't aware, the two candidates, which is the incumbent president of the United States and the other crazy person, because they're both like equally, I think, unstable in some ways. I'm not saying they're the same. Not saying they're the same, people. Not saying they're the same.
But definitely probably both unfit to be.
But yeah, so we're choosing from two equally like questionable.
It's just rough.
Old men.
Wherever you stand, it's just rough.
It's not good. We're not in a good situation. In a population of many people, millions of people in the United States that would be way more qualified. We are stuck with these options. So I have told Frank that the only way I'm getting my political news in the next few months is through like TikTok, like if someone wants to lip sync something that happens at a debate,
this is what I'm saying.
I'll consume it that way.
This is what I'm saying. So the plan is now that Taylor Swift will get which was like the Kathy Lee Regis, but now it's Taylor Swift, Oprah, and the guests will just be presidential nominees.
Also done some questionable stuff. So I don't know. We'll have to see.
That's the end of that.
I think you and I
bottom line is
should
like Kelsey
be
says,
co-presidents.
We are the Regis and Kathy Lee of foresight. That's what Kelsey says. So.
Yes.
Welcome, Peter.
It's hot
Marcy.
in New York.
Oh my gosh, it's so.
I can tell you right now that it feels like Jurassic Park when you walk outside of our offices in the state of Florida.
As a matter of fact, it's so humid, it's almost foggy.
Yeah, no, you're essentially breathing air when you exit air conditioning.
But I was trying to relate it to featuring from the fog.
You're trying to relay it back. That's cute. I like that.
There is a type of fog in Florida. It's just called Wednesday.
There's a fog in our political discourse as well.
There's
a mental fog.
There was a fog with Regis and Kathy Lee. There was fog. Everything we talked about is fog so far. You just didn't know it.
You just didn't realize it. It's about pattern and sense making, people. Like, make the connection. Okay. What's the problem?
We love to be silly and just, get started here and talk and
have shtick, man.
Witty banter. But if you have tuned in today, thank you for joining us. And we want to continue our discussion on featuring from the fog.
And if you didn't join us last time, let's just do it like super quick, like sort of recap about,
if we can,
which is
if we remember
a quick recap for us. That's an oxymoron.
Oh yeah,
quite honestly.
That's true.
But I will just say that this has been, I think, one of that episode that we had, if you haven't watched it, was a great episode. It was one of my favorite ones.
Yeah.
Super immersive.
I mean, it's a little weird for me to be saying so good about something that Yvette and I did, but
it's so good. I can say it was so good because I felt like the episodes, the podcast episodes and live stream episodes and the client engagements and the trainings and all that, the ones I love the most are always the ones that I feel like I'm learning alongside like work.
Same.
So I feel like, and I meant to make a LinkedIn post this week promoting today's live stream, and I just never got around to finishing it. It's a draft, but I can tell you that it was going to be like an homage to you. So I'll just say verbally, I will verbally share my LinkedIn post. How about that?
That's nice.
It had a really cute picture of the two of us.
That's good.
Yeah. Start because you got to get them with the image right away. So this is better because you got us like in real life, like we're moving and stuff. Okay. And I was just going to say that, along with my master's degree in business, I often joke that I have a master's degree in and Frank Spencer.
Which is sort of embarrassing, and not true, because I've learned so much from you.
But I have learned so much from you, especially, obviously within the foresight realm and outside of the realm. But this episode, this couple of episodes are a great example of how you challenge me and remind me what this is really all about. And so futuring from the fog is really a response and an idea of uh, you know trying to go against this idea that the goal of foresight is not to predict, is going against this idea that foresight is to predict. And everyone knows that, like even people who are more pop future will tell you foresight doesn't predict the future. Most of them have adopted that language, but yet their practice and the way that they're expressing themselves is still, when you really look at it, is really still looking for prediction. It's still about eliminating uncertainty. And futuring from the fog is leaning in to the uncertainty and saying that creativity and emergence happens within that fog.
Yeah.
And for me, even after over a decade of practice in the field, it's still like not necessarily my natural place to say like, oh yeah, let's get foggy, because I personally, like many people, enjoy clarity. I
think most people
Yeah.
would say they do. I mean, I'd be lying if I said that I don't.
Yeah.
But I also do. Maybe it's the Aquarian in me or something. But
Yeah.
I tend to get bored really easy. I
Yeah.
get bored once I
Yeah.
created a logo.
Yeah.
I wanted something else.
Well, yeah, and I think it's this idea that our goal is to create clarity in every situation and
Yes.
to eliminate the uncertainty. And as futurists, we really have to challenge that notion.
That's right.
And if this is making you feel uncomfortable, then you're in the right place.
You're in the right place.
Lean into that discomfort, friends, because again, I just think that it's worthy of just sort of sitting on here for a minute and just really describing what we mean by this.
There's two things that I would add to that quickly, just playing off of what you already said. One, I think that we crave the clarity for multiple reasons, but one of them is because the systems have trained us to do it.
Oh, yeah.
And so our mechanistic linear systems that reward us, and we know what reward means and how we live and how we make our money and how we get by in life, very much trains us, hypnotizes us, you could even say, to really seek that out, because we know that's how we get rewarded and how we live and how society works and blah, blah, blah. But if we lived in different systems, we would probably think quite differently.
And it's wild how those systems, from the moment we are born,
it's in you. You just have to admit that it's in you.
In the womb, we are exposed to these systems. Like, you don't realize
it is true.
how much these systems and
that's not even an exaggeration, because epigenetically you actually are.
Yeah. So it's not an easy, like, it's not like flipping a switch or anything, but recognizing that so much of what we do, as you say, is because of the systems that we are just inheriting.
Right.
And really questioning those systems. Yeah.
And then I would add to that, the part that I would add is, I would be lying to you if I told you that the way that the universe works, and we are part of the universe, it's so sad that we've separated ourselves from everything else, but that's what a part of being foggy is, recognizing that we are nature, we are cosmic. If that sounds weird, then I could word it a different way, but bottom line is we should be connected to all this. And if that's the case, everything except the systems, the human systems that we live in, they operate this way. They are abductive, they're liminal, they're interconnected, they're vibrant, they're emergent. They're not mechanistic and linear and predictive. And so I would be lying to you if I told you that foresight and futures thinking stops at, it's sort of like on beyond zebra, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, all the way to Z, and then there's an alphabet beyond that. Foresight is really seeking that alphabet beyond that. And I would be lying to you if I told you that foresight is about clarity, because it's not. Foresight is about seeking uncertainty and being comfortable with that uncertainty and understanding that things are moving and changing and emerging. And that's the reality. And I know, because we've made our organizations to be certain, and they struggle in uncertain environments. And let me ask you, which one's wrong, the environment or the organization? Is it the organization that we built that's right and the rest of everything else is wrong? Or is it the universe that's right and our organizational models are not right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think if you recognize that in our desire to control what is uncontrollable and to predict what is unpredictable, right? In our efforts to do that, this is where we're creating more and more of the issues and the problems
That's right.
that we're trying to solve. So I know it in some respects, it might seem counterintuitive, but when you read about this more, when you research about this more, you recognize. And so today we want to take the conversation a step further, because I know probably a lot of you are thinking, well, does that mean, does futuring from the fog mean we just throw our hands up and we just go with the flow?
Yes.
We don't think so.
No,
we don't think so. We definitely think there's a conversation about agency that we want to have today.
Yeah, it's really funny that you say that, because it's weird that we think the two choices are either certainty or throw my hands up in the air.
Yeah, I either have to try to pretend to have 100% control over it,
or never mind, I'm going to shoot my football and go home.
That is so us. That is so human, honestly. At least modern human.
It sounds really whiny. And
that's one thing that I did not allow in my children. That whining was just the one thing.
Whiny.
Children can cry, but there was just something about me personally that the whining was just like.
That's an interesting point too, because like sometimes you get a lot of whine it out, and I think that's what the universe is doing to us.
Maybe that's why futuring from the fog is hard for me.
Yeah,
because I like
whine it out
to like let the universe whine.
You can kick and scream and throw yourself on the ground and throw a temper tantrum, but the universe is sitting there looking at you going, whenever you're ready to get back up again, you can move on here. And so literally what we're saying here is there's an option that doesn't even seem to be in our purview, because it seems so foreign to the systems that we're in, that we're like, is there a third option or a third or fourth option? And there is, but it's like, it's not even intuitive what that is. Because it's like, well, it's either you're in control or you're not. I mean, what's in between? And I'm not sure it's something even that's in between. I think it's something that's outside of our purview. It's off to the side of our view.
Yeah.
I would love to read a very short piece from Nora Bateson's. Yeah, everybody who tunes in and ever follows us knows that we're big fans of Nora Bateson, who is Gregory Bateson's daughter, and head of the Bateson Institute and warm data. And we talked about it last time with Phanopoesis and somathacy, and we're going to get into a little bit more of that today. But she wrote a poem. It appears in her new book, Combining, and it's called Kinky. And I think that this is Nora's way of talking about futuring from the fog, but she calls it being kinky.
Okay.
And so instead of being foggy, she's talking about being kinky.
Okay.
And I'd love to read this little piece right here. It's not the whole poem, but she says, when you see the clarity of a future horizon, turn quietly into the thick bush. The clear path is itself a warning, trimmed and tucked by procrastination, impulses of industrial habit. Instead, find the vital tangle of broken lines and crags, a fest of possibility in the festering. The future is kinkier than we thought. And that's what I talk about when I'm saying this is how reality works. And so Nora's first thing is, she says, if you see anybody or anything or any field or any company, I'm getting hairy here, telling you this is the path, you should be really worried about it, because a well-worn path means that that's the one that's always been walked on over and over again.
It's the dominant narrative. Yeah. It's the the current.
And the future is not in it. It's in the thick bush. So thick bush, fog, they're the same
Yeah.
kind of metaphor, right? Where we find the future is in thick bushes, in foggy places.
Yeah.
That's where the real good stuff really is. And the well-worn path that we've done over and over and over again misses all the stuff that's hidden by the fog. And in that fog is all the richness. In the thick bush is the richness. Or she even calls it the festering. We're like, oh my God, stay away from festering. But I love how she says a fest of possibilities in the festering. So you like chop festering in half at just a festival. Festival is in the festering.
Yeah.
Which is what? And I just think that's so powerful. It leads into what we wanted to talk about today in terms of going further into futuring from the fog. One of the places we left off last time and we didn't get to was we were talking about, we wanted to talk about agency.
Yes.
And I think that's what you were referring to a moment ago.
Yeah.
It's like either we have complete certainty or we throw our hands up in the air, throw ourselves on the ground and start throwing a temper tantrum. And I think that means that we need to talk about what is agency? Do we have it? Is it something different than we even think that it is?
Yeah. I always think it's interesting that there are differing schools of thought within the foresight field about, this idea of agency. And I struggle with this because to me, of course we have agency. We're creating the future every day with our actions. Now, to me, we should strive for more people to have agency to create better futures. And our issue lies in the fact that many within marginalized communities don't have a voice, don't feel like they have agency, aren't in the driver's seat. And, they're being just drug into a future where they're not really present or where their values are not present.
That's right. Whose future?
Right.
Whose future is being created?
Right. So that's when you mention agency in relation to the future, that's what I think about. I think it's I feel like in many conversations, even those of us, and I would consider myself to be privileged because I get to have these conversations and I get to consider, decisions that I can make or people can make and guide them through those decisions. But even I often feel like I lack agency when I look at these high level discussions about technologies, for example, like AI or, brain to machine interface or those types of things.
Right.
Because I feel like the narrative that's being crafted either says that humans are less than this technology or should defer to this technology and therefore should not have as much agency, or the power dynamics that are currently in power, those individuals or organizations or systems should continue to have the only agency or only voice. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I think it's a very powerful concept in futures. And so when we start talking about futuring from the fog, we're also talking about pluriversal instead of hegemonic voices, trans-rationalism, which is a big fat word that just means, it's like when we think rationally, we're thinking in one linear way of thinking. This is rational, all the rest is irrational. But there are many voices that don't agree with the same thing. And, I'm the only one that sees the world probably the way I do. And most of the world sees the world very differently. And so trans-rational across rationalities. How do we start to think about moving from a rational way of thinking to a trans-rational way of thinking, many voices, the many voice future? And if not, a lot of our futuring can shrink the future instead of widening the future. When we only future outside the fog, we've shrunk the future down to this. But when we future inside the fog, we're widening the breadth of the future. And so we have to be very careful in our trend hunting and our organizational, our corporate foresight that we're not, which we are, shrinking the future.
It's interesting because, I didn't think about it in those terms, but when we try to solve uncertainty or remove uncertainty,
we're shrinking it.
We're shrinking the future. We're eliminating possibilities. That's really the antithesis of what futurists should be doing. They should be illuminating many, many possible futures, as you said, from many, many voices. And so
That's right.
maybe that's the way that might be easier for people to sort of understand the importance of futuring from the fog, which is, important for many, many reasons. But this is a great one. We don't want to be reductionist. We don't want to,
That's
we're
right.
not trying to like, with a light source, like aim the beam of light, to one point.
That's right.
We're meant to, really make the light shine across,
Yeah,
the prism, right?
exactly. And so when you think about that cone of possibilities again, too, stop thinking about it only being like outcomes or objects, but as Yvette says, voices. So, when you narrow the beam of light, you've got only minimal
Yeah.
voices and you've got those dominant voices, mostly tech voices, right? Um, but the beam of light is more voices being included.
That's one of the main reasons, like when we talk about unconscious bias, and this is an interesting just aside here, that we're now getting calls and inquiries, at least from the US market, about how we can position our trainings and our offerings to not at all emphasize or focus on the unconscious bias. Because for those of you that are not from the US, there's been a sad pushback on diversity and inclusion. And it started off as almost seeming frivolous, like, oh, I don't want that department, or I don't want that term used. And now it's become to where there's been laws and regulations at the state level that have made people that are making purchasing decisions on behalf of their organizations have to ask us to change the framing of our learning objectives, which is incredibly scary and unfortunate. But that's an aside. The reason that made me think of it is because I think for me, again, when I think about unconscious bias, and when a lot of people think about, I think unconscious bias as it relates to foresight, it's like, oh, let me make sure I don't have any blind spots as it relates to the future, and that this is critically important, right?
That's right.
But I think it's super interesting in relation to the way you're describing, for example, the cone of possibilities and the many voices, is that if you cannot understand or appreciate or just recognize that there are other voices and they are valuable. And if you're not able to work through what is necessary to be able to be open minded and open your heart to perspectives outside your own, then how can you possibly future from the fog? Like, you cannot.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
it's a non-starter.
It's a
So you're
non-starter.
so again, this is why this idea of unconscious futures thinking, unconscious bias modeling should be part of every foresight
Absolutely.
exercise, every foresight
Absolutely.
engagement. Daily, we should be doing that for ourselves and for our clients and for our stakeholders, for sure.
Yeah. Circling all the way back again to leaving out all those voices uh, is one of the reasons that we fall into the rut of our problems.
Mm.
And so Einstein was famous for saying, I've said this so many times, even on these live streams, that we cannot solve our current problems from the same level of consciousness that created them.
Yeah.
And so to expand that consciousness means to think transrationally and pluriversally. And that means the voices that got left out, because we created the problems and we exacerbate the problems by shrinking the voices that are included in the future, because those voices have important elements and culture for our futures, and leaving them out and only focusing on colonial settler dominant voices is just destructive. It's completely
Which is
destructive.
why the current move by some of our political leaders to begin to remove this language and these structures of diversity, equity, and inclusion is so problematic. And I just don't think people understand how deeply problematic it is.
It's hard.
And it, again,
But they train.
I know.
But we've been trained for a future where we get by.
I know.
And I think one of the most powerful things that futurists can do is to help people to see that they don't have to just get by. We can thrive. What does thrivability look like?
Mhm.
And again, the fog is more dominant than the places that are just clear in the past that are well worn. And so you're leaving out a lot when you don't feature from the fog.
Yeah, I think too, it's like
Bush, the thick bush.
I think too that again, on the surface it could seem like featuring from the fog or featuring from the bush, as Nora would say, um is is anti-inspirational. Like, so we could have a whole episode about like fear mongering and how fear is utilized in sort of change efforts and foresight efforts, and why we really lean towards optimism and inspiration. And so at the surface you might think, wow, featuring from the fog doesn't seem like it would be super inspirational. And that's again because our mindset is that this is a scary place. But if we can get over that hurdle, you can recognize that, to Frank's point, that it is truly inspirational to be able to leverage all of these points of view
Oh, it's so powerful.
in the creation of more equitable and better futures. And again, this idea of agency, that we can and we should do this, is, I think, is so important.
Yeah,
Like, I just,
so important.
again, I think this idea of prediction and eliminating uncertainty gives you a false sense of control. It's not a real true sense of, you're not you're in control. If you want to be in, and if you want to have a sense of control that is true, it's about, crafting and creating transformational futures that engage, all of everyone that's going to be in that.
Can I take this thought of agency a little bit further?
Yes.
Step further? Because I love that we talked about agency being multifaceted. And I think that's where real agency lies. One of my favorite psychologists that wrote extensively on agency, Bandura, really talked about agency being cooperative, collective, and collaborative, and that's where agency really lies. And I had a little piece here from, I thought that was really interesting, from our good friend Bayo Kumalafe.
Okay.
And of course, many of you watching probably have read a lot of Bayo Kumalafe. If you're not familiar with Bayo, you should read his stuff.
I think we had him as a GFAC
We did.
speaker.
We had him a GFAC speaker, so you should go watch that. And as a matter of fact, he really challenged us, because he was like, I know I might get shot down today, but I'm going to basically say, that like the way that foresight is practiced is just the antithesis of life. And that if we're really going to, future, it should be about, as a matter of fact, he even talked about the trickster, which is like the fog. He's like, the trickster upends your certain futures, But I love this thing that he wrote here, and I pulled it out for featuring from the fog. He says, your life is not the breathing space squeezed between your birth and your demise. In fact, it is not your life as such. You own none of it. Your failures, your disappointments, your accidents, your successes, your failed attempts at mastery, and your many inabilities, they're no one's property. They're a sweeping movement of becomings, the counterfeit immobility, the cloudy plumes of relations that bring shape and form and color to everything. So hold on, this is going to get interesting. You are the denseness of those unspeakably intricate gestures. Sounds like the fog, doesn't it? Those bodily signals that connect bare stone and spinning galaxy in a single sigh. We are always of the village, and the thorns in our flesh are gifts of the previous as well as the yet to come ancestral futuring, right? Now, I love, he says, reading this, you might hastily conclude that life is about surrendering, and that if life isn't ours to live or own, then there's no sense in being accountable. If our lives weren't ours, wouldn't that absolve us from the kinds of responsibilities that make for practical materialities of care? Wouldn't we be giving up too much to be a wishy-washy notion of entanglement that knows nothing of the fierce everydays we contend with? And then he says, to that I would say that life is also in the not surrendering, in the gasping for air, in the muscles taught resistance to being squelched by the limbs of an assailant, and seeking distance and abstraction. Life, death, for they must be considered as meandering lines of intimacy, is a thresholding, a differentiation, a traveling with, to displace us from the perch of ownership. Is not to pull down our sails, is to notice that the winds offer more than direction. So basically what he was saying there is also in line with the study of cognition, that cognition is not just about an internal thinking, But true cognition includes the internal, the body, because we often think about mind and body being separate, but but embodiment, and Bio loves to talk about this, and so does Sophie Strand, that our bodies, which in the Western world have sort of been discarded to a great degree, are so important to cognition. So is the external environment. Our thinking and the way that we decide and make choices and have agency aren't just coming from our minds and our thoughts. They're coming from external influences on us. They're coming from the way our bodies react to our surroundings. And then the fourth thing is the mutual relationships we have with one another. As a matter of fact, the philosopher Ian McGilchrist says there is no reality that comes from anything but relationship. Relationship forms all reality. Interconnection forms all reality. So what I'm saying there is that our agency isn't individual, it's collective. And it includes not just the human, but the non-human as well. It extends beyond the human. So here's where our agency lies. And this is the shift that needs to take place, is stop trying to control and dominate. And as Rian Eisler says, be in partnership with. And when we start thinking that partnership outcomes are more important than dominion outcomes, then we've made the shift. We're like, oh, my agency lies in all of us thriving, not in performing a certain duty or outcome.
Yeah.
But understanding what wants to emerge and working in tandem with it to cause that to be what emerges. So for the health of the whole. So now agency becomes collective, cooperative, and collaborative, and not individual, purpose-driven, outcome-driven, goal-driven. It becomes about what wants to emerge. And now I'm like, oh my God, I have even more meaning now, because I need to, in my diversity, connect to the whole. And the whole is what has agency, not the individual, not the parts. The parts don't have agency. The whole is what has agency.
And this is something that we see natural to us and to other living things, right? So, because I think, a skeptic might say, wow, this all sounds well and good. Sounds awesome, really.
Yeah.
But how do you get this downloaded into someone? How do you get people to behave this way? And I think our argument would be, we already naturally do this. It's the systems around us that have sort of lessened that natural instinct. This is not the best example, but I saw the hurricane that just recently has made landfall in the U.S. and sadly
Hurricane Beryl
really impacted islands in the Caribbean as well. And our thoughts and prayers go out to everyone that has been impacted by that storm. But I watched, there was a car caught in floodwaters and just watched, wonderful, amazing humans just jump into action, not first responders, because there's no time in those situations. Nope. And there almost didn't need to be a word spoken. Everybody just dove into action.
I love that metaphor.
And so
powerful.
I think that if we look to when we are, push comes to shove, how humans behave is our true instinct, is to behave, as you said, cooperatively, collectively, with the greater good in mind, knowing that we all benefit when this happens. And
we can go down that rabbit hole, because deeper, deeper the more you go down it in terms of planetary health, universe health, cosmic consciousness. But even if all of that is like, what the heck is Frank talking about? Just at that level, that it started that level of, and as Kelsey says, I love that our agency lies in our collective whole. At least start there and understand we have this incredible opportunity and futuring for me. And I think that inevitably it leads down this path. It's like, if we're going to talk about the future, how can it be the future of this company or the future of that one particular product or the future of that? Because none of that is in isolation. And so futures inevitably leads you into the fog. It leads you down this road of the whole.
It's so interesting.
It leads you there. You can't avoid it. And I've been to so many conferences where people are like, no. And we're going to have this talk about how it helps my particular organization. And your organization is not separate from the rest of humanity. And these things are all connected. And so future thinking and foresight leads you there. You can't avoid it.
Yeah. And again, I think where you've seen foresight co-opted and
It's the co-option. Yeah.
it is where people sort of find they think, oh gosh, I mean, everybody gets excited. Most people get excited when they're like, wow, there's a set of tools and there's this thing, and you could get more engaged in the future. And you're right, when they kind of look around and say, wait, this is not, even though I know I was told you can't predict the future, I still want some control over this. And my organization is paying for me to eliminate risk and reduce uncertainty.
Right.
And this is not, then that's when, foresight becomes co-opted, and it just becomes like a glamorized consumer insights, competitive intelligence, market research, as opposed to truly what foresight is. And we're not going to like argue and say, people need to be kicked out. We're just going to sit here and tell you what, if we can practice foresight the way that it should be practiced, then in and of itself, it will lead us to addressing these issues. And again, it's like, who's going to do it? You're going to do it. We're going to do it. We're going to model this behavior.
That's right.
That's how you future from the fog, is that you model the behavior of this collective and cooperative perspective and agency in creating better futures. And you speak of it, and you drown out, and you speak as loudly or more loudly than the other voices.
Yeah.
Around futures and future.
And I love that you're saying this, because it would be very easy for me and for all of us to say, and I think we would more agree with each other than not. It's like, look, Frank, the rubber's got to meet the road here. I mean, tomorrow is Thursday, and then we got things to do, and blah, blah, blah. I totally get that. But let's not just throw up a barrier immediately, because we do have the power to change systems. So I want to sort of get off on this.
Yes, let's talk about systems
too, about systems, because a very famous and brilliant futurist this week put up a post that said, we don't create systems. We've got nothing to do with systems. Systems just come out of this interaction of all these things that I was talking about before. And you couldn't create a system, and you couldn't tear a system down. You can't change a system. You can't do anything about it. Which is sort of the opposite of what Bio just said, because he said, you don't throw your hands up. You understand that the sails are about more than direction. So the reality is that there are different kinds of systems.
Right. In the world, there are different examples of systems, whether they're governmental systems, education systems, economic systems. And if that's the case, if there are different systems in different cultures or geographies, then therefore systems must be created and destroyed at some point.
And centralized and decentralized systems.
Yes.
Because we can, and we've seen this happen. As a matter of fact, I saw the pushback on this post was from people saying, like, wait a second, there was a lot of colonialism that happened, and that was intentional. So you could, of course, get, really heady and say no, because people didn't know what they were doing and they're just going with the flow or whatever. But again, as part of the cosmic system, we do have an influence. So maybe when we talk about agency, we're talking more about influence than we are talking about ability to control.
Yes.
And so we need to understand that, because we can lean towards creating decentralized systems, or we can lean centralized systems, or we could lean into the collective, cooperative, collaborative decentralization systems, which is the way that things actually work. And I think that's so important. The reason I point that out is Johnson Rowson talks about really understanding the future from 3 levels: soul, social, society, and then systems. And we often think about it the other way around: systems and then what happens to me. But this is why I wanted to encourage every one of you that are listening, and whoever hears this afterwards too, is that when you think about something like an educational system, that is a large thing, the way we teach people. If we started teaching from this perspective, and we can do that, this is a matter of will. And surrender, will and surrender. That if that happened, then the next generation would completely think this way. This is why futures thinking from this perspective in the educational system is so important: governmental, et cetera, et cetera. And then things start to shift and change. It probably won't happen in my lifetime, But I'm nonetheless encouraged by the fact that I can work with people like those of you who are listening here,
Yeah.
and we can begin working on that system, and we can be the beginnings of that system. But again, it's not, we're not taking control, we're not taking the reins. We're instead understanding how we lean into that decentralized system that already exists, and be the part of surrender to the influence that we can have in that system. That aphanopoiesis, as Nora talks about, the grumblings of the elements below the surface that are looking to emerge. How do we surrender to that?
I think, again, we could have entire episodes on each one of these segments, but it struck me in your conversation just now, and what you're sharing, that our concept of time is really, really important here, right? And the idea of the long now, and how we measure time and how we measure legacy, because you made a statement that I think is really powerful. It may not be in my lifetime. It may not be in my lifetime. And I think that that's another thing that we need to really discuss as futurists is whose timetable and who's determining. Because like we can go to the extreme of like quarterly reporting, and we can go all the way to the more sort of lofty or broader ideas of long-term thinking that's much more indigenous in its origins.
That's right. Ancestral futuring.
I had a wonderful conversation with someone who's going to join us for the program in LA this fall. And she was, younger than me, as are many of the people that I talk to these days, because we're getting up there. But she was a younger, professional, and she said she's so bright. I cannot wait to meet her in person. But she said in one of the things, she's like, I am so passionate about pursuing futures thinking and exploring this field further and applying these to my work, because I know it may not, the results of this, I may not get to see them in my lifetime. And it struck me that she's like, I may not see this come to fruition in my life, but it is still worthy of my efforts. And that's like, if we all had that perspective, what a different world we would have. What a different world would we have?
You would definitely pull the future faster into it than you thought you would. But nonetheless, still, that's not what we're trying to do. And I love this idea of ancestral futuring, which is what you talk about. We start off our first night at our transformations retreat with ancestral futuring that sets the stage for the rest of the time together. The cooperative evolutionary trait of perceiving emerging novelty that then fosters or cultivates the reaction of co-creating transformational reality.
Yeah.
And that's where it all starts. It's like, if I understand the ancestors that had dreams of the future, I latch onto them and let those flow into me. And then I understand what it means for me to carry that torch and be an ancestor for those yet to come. This is really all about ancestral futuring.
Yeah.
And that is, I know that our ancestors would say, I passed the fog on to you. Are you passing the fog on to others?
Yeah.
Are you going to just walk down this well-worn path that somebody else created for you and forget the dreams that have yet to be fully birthed? They laid the road for us to realize something. And it's really a travesty not to continue to walk into that reality. So
yeah, I think that just another sort of gut check for us, as futurists or just individuals that, want to have a responsibility to those that come after us, is a recognition that if we're too comfortable in our decision making and the things that we're doing day in, day out, if we only worry about our own comfort and our own ease with the things that we're doing and the things that we're discussing, you are definitely not futuring from the fog. You yourself have to feel a level of discomfort. If you are truly futuring from the fog, if you are just following that well-worn path, it's super easy to fall into that groove. That's why that groove is there, because I'm just following the next person, look how nice. There's no, I'm not going to get any, anything on my clothes because it's like, there's no nasty grass there. I'm just going to be able to walk and look how nice the path is.
Yeah.
So just, I think, if you're not able to join us for the retreat, at the retreat, we obviously have much more time to go through over several days, these concepts, and it's obviously much more participatory than a live stream.
Yeah.
But if you're not able to join us, there's tons of resources on our website that are available as well for free. But I think just things to leave you with as we sort of close out this live stream is just, again, lean into the discomfort. If you're following that well-worn path, you probably need to just stop and pause and ask yourself, hey, wait a minute. Am I just going through the motions here? Am I just doing this because the groove is there and it feels super easy for me to fall into that groove? Look, we've all done that. We have to challenge ourselves every day. Trust me. We're all living within the systems that we're attempting to overthrow.
It is so in you that I don't mean to leave anybody on a bummer note, but it's like you're probably not going to get it out of you. The best thing to do is recognize is that it is there,
and that's important.
And don't pass it on.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. It's like, I think we have to be realistic because, like, the reason why people say there's no way to topple these systems is because, it's not going to be one or a few hundred people that are going to do that. And it can be discouraging at times. I think, again, foresight as hope, as a source of hope is so critical. And I think that's something else that has been driven out because somehow hope and optimism and transformation aren't in alignment with the mechanistic consumer driven ideas of our organizations and our institutions. It's like transformation and optimism and hope are seen as somehow fluffy and not realistic.
How horrible is that?
It's so horrible.
Horrific.
The only way to pull ourselves out of these systems and structures is to continue to think about and create and make decisions and inform people about the fact that we can do better. We can do better. And there are examples of better things going on.
It's happening. There's a paradigm shift underway, bottom line. And that's why you actually see, by the way, I don't know if you've been watching international, you don't like to fall into politics, but there's been
I like it when it's
you like it when it's good, right? How crazy is it that, what was it, 10 years ago, Brexit?
I know.
And now England's like,
my bad.
Throw them all out. And they went completely,
which is, I don't know. It's good. Like that outcome, I think for me,
and same thing in France this week.
But also, like, gosh, like, it's like counterintuitive, right? Because we just said, oh God, it's so hard to topple systems. And then it seems to topple
literally
and not have, like, what can we know why that happened? Like it just feels so like, I don't know, like happenstance. And I don't like that.
I thought that
it's like emergence. I don't like just like.
I heard somebody say this weekend, Jon Stewart said it on his recent show, The Daily Show, he's really funny.
Yeah.
He said, the bottom line is people are so fed up with the system we're in that whatever represents change is what they'll go towards.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't so much that people were looking to like, these are the particular policies, but somebody was offering change and they're like, everybody in the world's like, this doesn't work. And so if somebody comes and offers change and you're just trying to get by, you probably will just go vote for the change or whatever. But a lot of those people are just really recognizing the same thing that we're all saying here today is that, like, it doesn't work. That well-worn path does not work.
If you want an example of our natural tendency to want the well-worn path and to not go into the fog, if you want to, this is a great litmus test, in my opinion. This is what I have found in groups. Like, reactions to this idea are usually pretty indicative of how, like, I wonder if you can guess what I'm going to say, what the idea is. But anytime we bring up universal basic income or universal basic services,
people lose their mind.
And it's not just like the traditionally conservative people. Like, and so again, look, I'm not saying that universal basic services or universal basic income is a panacea of a solution. But when you hear the words universal basic income or universal basic services, you feel yourself recoil You feel like you're shutting down and you're like questioning, well, how will we know? And that is a sure sign the systems are speaking to you. The incumbent systems are driving your behavior and reaction. Take a deep breath, walk away for
And
a
this speak
minute.
not just to policy or outcomes, but also values and our belief about humans.
Yeah.
The misanthropy just rises to the surface,
Yeah.
which these systems are very misanthropic. And we hear over and over, humans tend to, fight and flight. Humans tend to be evil at their core, and humans, that's false. That's completely false. And you should listen to my recent interview with Ryan Eisler, who says that, that is just a lie. It's just a complete lie.
Yeah.
And scientifically, historically, it can be proven to be the opposite. And these systems have made us think this is the way people are. It's misanthropy. It's just misanthropy. I guess I just wanted to leave by saying this, like, be encouraged, because a minute ago you said 1 or 100 people aren't going to change it, and I agree with that 1,000%. But 1 and 10 and 20 and 100 people can make a big difference.
Absolutely. And I think when we talk about the future being about people,
or the thought that there might be, as JT says, can't wait to see him in a couple of weeks, that there might be something after capitalism. Look, was it Le Guin that said, that the idea that capitalism has such a hold on it, hold on us, that we can't imagine there being any other system. It's easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of capitalism, which is insanity. But
that's such a good point.
And she said, it has this hold on us. We live in it, but so did the divine rights of king.
Yeah.
Which some are trying to bring back again. But, those systems do fall. And understanding, that this is what we're really futuring towards. As Sonia Bono says, our good friend Sonia, she says, it's really about process ontology and not object ontology. That, what we're talking about here is understanding what is the larger, longer process, and how do I dive into that? How do I yield to that? How do I have relationship with that, rather than what are the objects that are appearing on the surface and how do I co-opt them and leverage them?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, when we talk about the futures about people, it's often because, ideas of technology take center stage. But I think that the other component here is, a really in hand in hand with what we've been talking about today, is that if you embrace human-centric notions of the future, then you recognize then that, we're not this flawed thing that needs to be corrected by technology, and that misanthropy that you talk about is really, really dangerous. And I think there could be a whole episode on that too.
A whole episode.
Because people think it's like, oh, I'm being humble by saying that. But in reality, it's a really,
You're
really
disconnecting yourself from the rest of the universe.
And it's just a very dangerous narrative to say. And it makes it easier for people that are in power today to continue to exploit.
That's exactly right. Oh, you misanthropic a-hole.
Yeah.
You need to surrender to, all this.
Pretty sure there has not been a single person in recent history that have used the phrase, you misanthropic a-hole.
Really? Have you met Elon Musk?
I was looking
daily on Twitter.
Let me tell you.
X.
Let me tell you.
Misanthropic a-holes. Our good friend Marcus Bussey, amazing futurist Marcus Bussey, he said on Featuring at the End of the World, the thing that we did recently with all of the cool people that were on there. You can see that too on our website, Featuring Foresight at the End of the World. He, in his little piece that he talked about, he said, I hate, this is his exact words. He said, I hate, and I almost want to throw up when I hear the word, the Anthropocene.
Yeah.
He said, I don't believe in it. I think it's false. It's a stupid message. It's made by people that are in control, and we need to lean into a symbiocene, and there is no Anthropocene. That's BS. And so people will go like, wait, but haven't we influenced and blah, blah, blah and everything? But that's not what happened. That's not what influenced. That's not what happened. It's the system. It's the system.
Bottom line.
Bottom line.
So we hope that you all have enjoyed this second part of our Futuring from the Fog conversation. We could keep going. We should keep going. I think our next live stream, though, we're going to talk about the future of media. And I think that's timely given, the election year that we're facing, but really globally, just thinking about how media and information is communicated and how we can have more literacy around that, how we can have more agency around that, and how it impacts the futures that we're creating every day. So hopefully you all will join us. I think that's our next live stream. I probably should have checked before I said that, but I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it is.
Yes, yes.
And that's a lead up to our program in LA. So we have a couple of foundations programs if you're interested in learning the nuts and bolts, the toolkit, the natural foresight toolkit. We have a couple more programs this year, one in person in LA and one live online in October, November. So LA is in October. And then if you're interested in diving more into this idea of the collective co-emergent future that Frank's been talking about for a long time and his work around holoptic foresight dynamics, we would encourage you to join us at our retreat. There's a couple of spots left. And it's happening in Maine, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have about that as well. But it's been lovely to hang out with you, sir. Thank you so much for your time.
Always. I love these conversations. And again, as you said, this sort of leads into this, we're actually doing something about this. It's why we launched the Transformations Retreat. And there's more to come on all of that and the plans that here at TFSX we're making for that. But the people that are a part of it, like JT Mudge, who's on here today, and Zan Chandler and Kelsey Volkman and Nalita Gomez, they went to the retreat last time.
Yep.
That's the community of holoptic dragonflies. Hey, what's this dragonfly thing, Frank? Come to the transformation retreat and find out. Dragonfly has a lot to tell us about Futuring from the Fog and collective cooperative evolutionary trait of foresight. So I would love to see you there in September. And but if not, there'll be plenty of other things that you can join us at and keep in touch with us. So.
All right. Until next time, see you later, guys.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.